And now I'd like to talk to you about reallocating the resources of your church during this time. Now here's a quadrant to help you identify and categorize what needs to be realigned. This tool can be really helpful as you walk a team through navigating the different phases of ministry and different phases of reopening as we move ahead. And it's also a really helpful template that's attached to walk through with your team. And I've heard it said that the Chinese word for crisis is made up of two different strokes. One is danger, the other is opportunity. And this tool will also help you identify a few things that you strategically stop forever and never, ever, ever restart, even when you establish that new normal. If I sound excited about that, it's because I'm a former executive pastor. So let's take a look at this. We have a y-axis, of course, and a x-axis. Our y-axis is actually why the church exists. It's the essential ministries of the church. So think purpose of the church, Great Commission, Great Commandment, discipleship, fellowship, worship. But a word of caution here is needed on the essential ministries of the church. We want to be careful because a byproduct of the purpose-driven movement, as an example, was that everyone now had a really great argument for why their ministry should exist. So I could start any affinity-based ministry I wanted and staunchly defend it as evangelism or fellowship or even discipleship, and I had a really good argument. Now, we don't need 14 different ministries vying for resources to do one of those essentials at this time. What we really need at our church is to focus on one or two that do it best for this particular season. Now, if your church is really large, then perhaps you can get away with a few more, but the more of these focuses we have, the more your resources are spread out. And the greater difficulty you will have communicating what is important with your staff and with your congregation. So let's take a look at the x-axis right now. And it's about a ministry's effectiveness during this time. You should also, I would say, consider the past effectiveness of this ministry. So roll back 3 months ago and think about what their effectiveness was during that time. And I want you to also think about how strategic something is. So we're going to have the sloping line up here as well to think about how strategic this is during this crisis. So here we go. If a ministry is not an essential ministry, negative mark, positive mark, not essential right now, then or effective, we want to stop doing it. No further questions asked. None are needed. This is your shot to kill a sacred cow, most likely. And as Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. This is likely your greatest opportunity that you will ever have to prune back ministries that are not really producing fruit at your church. Which brings me to our next quadrant. And that is if the ministry is still, not essential, but it is effective, or at least has a reputation for being effective. There's action, movement, energy around that. But it's not right now during this time. We want to shift those resources away to something that's more strategic. Now, we have a tool that goes along with this exercise that I mentioned before. It's going to help you process and plot in what phase you bring some of these ministries back. But again, this is a unique opportunity for pruning those back for good. It's in almost every church, there's something that once started out in perfect alignment with the purpose of the church. It was in perfect alignment with one of these essential ministries, but over the course of time, it experienced mission drift. And while it still was seen as effective, it was no longer in alignment. And what we must do when we get back to the new normal, or before we get back to the new normal, is we must eliminate the trivial good. Okay, so if the ministry is now essential, but not yet effective, we have to strategize around it. This is an essential ministry of the church after all, and we have got to get this right. We got to realign our people, our money, our communication, and other resources around this ministry, swarm that as a staff until we get it stabilized so that we can then scale it. And again, this tool will help you ferret that out. Now, this leads us to our final quadrant, scaling it. If it's essential and it's effective and it's strategic at this time, you continue to support and scale it. Just because we've been successful for a few weeks and we have other things that are, fires that are burning, don't put it on the back burner. Dedicate the time, the resources to elevate it in front of everyone so that there's clarity on what's important, what direction we're moving, and we can continue momentum accordingly at this time. Now, this assessment isn't a one-time thing. What works well in this particular phase or this particular season will not work well in the next. And again, I know we're all obsessed with processing the 3 phases of reopening and then getting back to a new normal church rhythm, but we all need to realize it won't be as neat and clean as the 3 phases on our spreadsheets. This is because things are continuing to change, and change is happening country by country, state by state, and county by county, and even city by city. So we have to continually assess our allocation of resources and adapt and respond. Continue to align our resources best to meet the needs of our church and people right now as new information comes to light. Now, once you've used the resources we've given you, you've realigned yourself, now we want to get down to the individual ministry level to figure out what's best next. And we'll do that in the next session. But before we do, I want to give you one more visual. I love visuals, and most people learn visually, so I think this is important. Think of an old world compass. Now, you don't just have a north, south, east, and west. No. You have a northeast, and you have a north-northeast, and an east-north-northeast. There's numerous directions here. Sometimes it's not even helpful because you can't tell which direction you're going. We're going to confuse everyone if we do this as a church, and we're going to, again, spread our resources too thin. So I would encourage you to use this opportunity to simplify this dial and strategically align your resources around a limited number of directions at your church.